Well, Canadian students rally in Montreal to protest against the government's decision to raise tuition fees. Scores of protesters were arrested after police stepped in to disperse the crowds. Well, to discuss that a bit further, we're now joined by Joshua Blakeney, Press TV's correspondent, who is joining us now via Skype from Calgary. Joshua, thanks a lot for joining us. Now, what exactly is going on here? Because Parti Québécois had originally said that it would not be raising tuition fees.
Yes, it's the height of political cynicism, Waka. The Parti Québécois, which is headed by Pauline Marois, who's now the Premier of Quebec, rose to power on the back of the student protests that were ubiquitous throughout Canada, but which had an epicenter in Quebec in 2012. About this time last year, Quebec erupted in protest in response to the then government of Jean Charest, who had proposed tuition fee hikes, and Pauline Marois had pledged that she would not raise tuition fees, and she appears to have done a volte-face. And the young people in Quebec are probably among the most politically conscious Canadians, because Quebec is a very politicized entity due to the questions revolving around separatism. And the students have taken to the streets en masse. They aren't partisan. They're not going to allow the Parti Québécois off the hook just because they're more aligned with the separatist aspirations of certain people in Quebec. A promise was made, and the students are saying they're feeling very let down. I think there is a perception that, whichever political party is in power in Quebec, that they're more aligned with the well-heeled in Quebec society, more aligned with the capitalists in Quebec society, who obviously benefit from having students coming out of university with tens of thousands of dollars of debt around their shoulders, because then when they get into corporations, they won't put their head above the parapet, they won't question their bosses, they won't defy the dictates of their superiors, because they need to have their job to pay their debts off. So we see this system in Western capitalist society these days of debt slavery, of young people being in tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And, I think the students would say, although the proposed tuition fee hikes are more modest comparatively when compared with the hikes proposed by the Charest government, that it's a slippery slope. And I often remind Press TV viewers that, Canada has got the second largest uranium reserves in the world, the third largest oil reserves in the world. In Quebec, it's well known as a place where hydroelectric power is generated in great quantities. And the young people are saying, look, where are these profits going? Is society going to be so undemocratic that all the wealth just goes to 1% of society, and working class people either have to choose to have no education because they can't afford it, or to get into tens of thousands of dollars of debt? Now, we also see a rather draconian aspect of this, and the media in Canada has been uncritically reporting the fact that the police have been declaring these protests illegal protests, which contradicts the Canadian Constitution, which is the supreme law of Canada, which was enshrined in 1982, which protects the rights of people in Canada to assemble, to have freedom of speech. So we see an attack on democratic rights being used, or these protests being used by authoritarian politicians. And
Joshua, I do apologize for having to interrupt you, but we will have to leave it there for now. But of course, we do appreciate your insight. That was Joshua Blakeney, Press TV's correspondent, speaking to us live from Calgary. Well, that is all for the Top 5. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back after a short break with plenty more news. Stay tuned.
Last week, the Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates